This was a couple of years back. I was around the age of 21, when I had just moved out from home. My new apartment, on the first floor in a relatively affordable part of town, felt like the epitome of independence. Little did I know that a seemingly ordinary Saturday would unfold into a nightmare-like experience that would forever haunt my memories. The day began as any other ordinary weekend. I spent the morning at home, enjoying the freedom of my own space. Around 3 p.m., a friend called, suggesting we grab something to eat and hang out. The day was casual, filled with laughter and carefree moments. I returned to my apartment around 7:30 p.m. As I entered my apartment, an unsettling feeling gripped me. The bedroom door, which I distinctly remembered closing before leaving, now stood ajar. My normal tendency to secure the room before stepping out suddenly felt like a distant memory. However, I brushed off the unease, chalking it up to a lapse in memory. The evening progressed, and I settled onto the couch, losing myself in the glow of the television. Hours passed, and the apartment, though seemingly unchanged, emitted an undercurrent of disquiet. I couldn't put my finger on it, but small anomalies, like misplaced items, subtle disturbances, and the like. I felt weird, and a little creeped out, but not enough to make anything of it. Shrugging off the growing discomfort, I proceeded with my nightly routine. I brushed my teeth and prepared for bed, convincing myself that I was merely giving into an overactive imagination. Ignoring the nagging feeling, I entered my bedroom and settled into the comfort of my bed, intending to lose myself in some late-night YouTube videos. The room, dimly lit by the soft glow of my laptop, felt cozy and familiar. However, as I immersed myself in the videos, a subtle scratching sound disturbed the silence. My ears perked up, and I paused the video, straining to find out the source of the noise. The room fell silent, intensifying the unease settling over me. Deciding it was only my imagination, I resumed watching the video. But then it happened again, the scratching sound, as if something or someone was beneath my bed. This time, I couldn't dismiss it. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a shiver ran down my spine. I sat up cautiously, scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and fear. That's when it happened, a gut-wrenching moment that still haunts me to this day. As my eyes roved across the room, they locked with the reflection in the mirror, under my bed, revealing a decrepit-looking man staring back at me. Time seemed to freeze as a wave of terror gripped my soul. The man's hollow eyes met mine, sending a chill through the very core of my being. Without thinking, I jolted to my feet, the urgency to escape overpowering my rational thoughts. But as I stood, his rough hand shot out, grabbing my leg with a strong grip. Panic surged through me, as I was practically fighting to break free. I was kicking and thrashing in panic, until his grip finally released. Without a second thought, I bolted out of my apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. My trembling fingers dialed the emergency number, and I relayed the horrifying encounter to the dispatcher. Within what felt like an eternity, but was likely only about 10 minutes, the police arrived. They combed through my apartment, searching every part of the apartment, but the intruder was nowhere to be found. The officer on duty told me that I had left a window unlocked, which was how the man had gotten in. As the police declared the apartment safe, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone may just be laying under my bed. The weeks that followed, I was met by sleepless nights and haunting visions of the man beneath my bed. Later, I read the news that terrified me to the absolute core. A patient from a nearby mental asylum had escaped, and I was apparently not the only person he visited. The same man who was laying under my bed had broken into someone else's house, where he waited for them to fall asleep, and later taking their life. The news left me horrified, and to this day, I still need to see my therapist every week. Just the mere thought of that man being minutes away from doing to me what he did to the other person, it messes with my head. This story takes place when I was 22 years old. I had just gotten home from a long night of stocking shelves at my local grocery store. I worked the closing shift, so I usually got home around midnight. I shared a cheap apartment with my roommate, Let's call him Mark for the story. We weren't in the best of neighborhoods, but I just felt lucky to have a place to live that wasn't my parents' basement. I threw my jacket on the coat rack next to the entrance door and walked into the kitchen to rummage through the fridge for something to eat. I had just pulled a frozen burrito out of the freezer when I noticed something weird. My bedroom door had been slightly open when I walked by the hallway. I know this doesn't sound strange at first, but I specifically remembered closing it that morning when I left for work. I like my privacy, so I always remember to shut my door when I leave for the day. I stepped back into the living room and looked down the hall. "Hello?" I called. There was just dead silence. Not wanting to let the fear get the better of me, I walked across the living room and flicked on the hallway light switch. "Mark? Is that you?" I asked. Mark had always been a bit of an odd guy, so I couldn't help but think maybe he was trying to play some sort of weird prank on me. Maybe waiting to jump out of my closet or something when I entered my room. When I finally got to the bedroom door, I gently pushed it open. The light from the hallway illuminated a large portion of the room. I looked around, definitely feeling the creepy vibes. There was no one there, and nothing looked out of the ordinary. Just the usual, my twin bed, with my nightstand just to the left. I closed the door shut and walked back into the kitchen. I popped my dinner in the microwave and pressed the start button. While that was cooking, I turned on the television, ready to put on a scary movie to watch and relax. Suddenly I heard a muffled thump coming from down the hall. At first I thought it was the neighbors or something. They can be pretty loud sometimes, and it's not unusual to hear a loud bump in the night. But then it happened again, and this time I could tell for sure it was coming from down the hall. "Mark?" I called once more. The microwave beeped just then, and I nearly had a heart attack. "Yeah, sorry. Dropped something," I could hear him say through the door. I'll admit, I felt a little better knowing that Mark was home. I walked back into the kitchen to get my food. And that's when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message. From Mark. "Hey dude, running a little late here at work. Could you please leave the door unlocked for me?" My stomach dropped to the floor and a chill ran down my spine. I texted back. "Wait, you're still at work?" He responded only a few seconds later. "Yeah, why?" At that moment there was another noise from the hall, and I looked up. The silhouette of a large man was standing there, holding what appeared to be a butcher's knife. I turned and ran towards the front door, hearing the heavy clunk of the man's boots behind me. He wasn't running, instead it sounded like he was slowly walking, taking his time. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the emergency staircase and out into the parking lot where I called the cops. The cops showed up just a few minutes later. They went upstairs and searched my apartment, but they said they didn't find anyone. What they did find still terrifies me to this day. As they were searching the apartment, the cops found a note left on the kitchen table, held under a salt shaker. On that note only one word was written. Soon. The day before Valentine's Day, 2010, I experienced the most terrifying night that I hope to ever experience, but it has more to do with the tragic as opposed to the paranormal. My mom and dad had asked me to dog-sit our family German Shepherd at the house I grew up in, while they took their first alone-together vacation since my brother and myself had been born. The plan was for them to be gone for 8 days, but the night in question, the third night after they'd left, was reason enough for them to come home early. I was sleeping on the couch in the living room, as my old bedroom was now a storage room for my dad's stuff, and around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. an explosively loud bang woke me up from a dead sleep, and my dog started going crazy. I assumed it was his barking that had woken me up, so despite being scared as hell, my first thought was to sit up on the couch and call him over to me, to reassure him that everything was fine and he could go back to sleep. But just before I was going to sit up to do that, I heard a woman scream, "No, Dad, no," in absolute terror, followed by another incredibly loud bang. And I immediately felt tiny plank splinters fall into my eye, from the wall the couch was against as they trickled down onto my face. That second bang turned out to be the sound of my neighbor shooting and taking his daughter's life. Those plank shavings that had gotten into my eye, they were from where the impact of either her body or the bullet, or both, hitting the wall, directly on the other side of where I was sleeping, had splintered some of the brick between our houses, and causing my living room wall to push in a few millimeters. My head would have been pretty damned close to this spot, had I actually sat up after the first bang to reassure my dog. Given that the bullet didn't actually come through the wall, I would have been fine even if I sat up, but knowing what I know now, I'm glad I laid there for that extra second. Naturally, I called 911, made sure my front and back doors, and all the windows, were locked, because the last thing I needed was for the guy to try to get into my house, and within 3 minutes the next bangs I was hearing were those of the police kicking the guy's door down, screaming for him to get on the ground. I sat at my window and watched them walk him out in cuffs and put him in a cruiser. It wasn't until the cops in the cruiser had driven away with him in the back that I finally opened my door to talk to the other cops that were still on the scene. I told them about what I just heard, also giving a statement as you usually do. A week later, I was sent to testify against him in court, because he was claiming that the whole thing was an accident. However, I heard his daughter scream "No, Dad, no," before he fired the second time. There was no way in hell it was accidental. Testifying against him was terrifying, because if he got off, well, he was my parents' neighbor and I knew he wasn't above murder. Thankfully, the DA made sure he didn't get off. He's 70 years old now and has another 20 years of jail time, with no possibility of parole.